So this video was originally supposed to be called The Last of Us Online is in More Trouble Than You Think, but I planned to make that video before all of the latest revelations of it, being abandoned. So that video idea is no longer that relevant. So we're kind of shifting gears and instead talking about the game, but now sort of as a post-mortem, I guess. Because despite the game's quick departure into the ether of gaming, there actually is a lot to talk about. And I think this project did have a lot of potential, a lot more than people perhaps want to give it credit for, which makes it all the more tragic that it's never gonna see the light of day. You see, the first thing that was really officially shared about this project was this piece of artwork right here by Neil Druckmann when he was speaking to Jeff Keighley on stage. And while initially it just seems like your standard piece of concept art, it's two characters standing with guns, some infected down here, another couple players down here it looks like, and then a city. Doesn't seem like you can take much from it, but there actually was a lot of information people gleaned from this, such as this sort of sandstorm looking thing that's blowing in from the right, implying perhaps this would have taken the form of a zone in a battle royale, pushing in and forcing the infected to close in on the player characters. So instead of like your standard battle royale where it's just like a zone or gas coming in, there would be that, but also swarms of infected and NPCs like that are also charging in. So playing around the edges of the map, which is kind of what's standard in battle royales, is no longer that viable because you can't just pinwheel up and around since there will be so many infected there. It's actually a really cool flip on the core formula that we've come to know very well over the last few years. And not to mention that the very concept of playing a multiplayer game with the level of quality that's to be expected from Naughty Dog, with the combat and gameplay systems of The Last of Us Part 2 and that graphical fidelity, and really at its core, the concept was very appealing to people. The idea was attractive that you could play an online multiplayer game with your friends against waves of enemies and infected with the graphical quality we've come to expect from Naughty Dog games and with the gameplay systems of The Last of Us Part 2, which were stellar. And I was one of these people that was kind of excited. I have not been the biggest fan of PlayStation's push into live service games, so much so that they're forcing single player devs and world-class ones at that to spend their valuable time doing this. I'm not a fan of that, but the concept intrigued me, and I thought that if this saw the light of day, it actually could be pretty successful, and I was excited to try it. And there was other concept art like this one showing kind of the scale of different arenas and places that you could expect to go and explore. Like the idea of going and running through a cruise ship down the hallways with infected inside, and there might be player characters inside some of the rooms hiding out until the zone closes a little bit more. That's a really cool concept. And then it also opened up the door where a lot of people were thinking maybe this shifted out of the battle royale phase and more into like an extraction shooter or something more hardcore like a Tarkov. This could have been really, really interesting. And with Naughty Dog's industry-leading tech, this could have been really cool. And as the last few years have gone by, a lot of us thought that they were doubling down on The Last of Us, so surely this would see the light of day. Of course, they had the amazingly successful HBO show, which has brought a whole new audience of players into the fold that weren't even really video game players before, but they loved the show so much they decided to go and try it. I know somebody that I used to work with in commercial real estate that went out and bought a PlayStation 5 just to play The Last of Us because he loved the show so much. Like, that's the appeal and the power of these intermedium collaborations. And it really seemed that Naughty Dog, while all of this was going on, was really hard at work. They didn't say much of anything. All they were releasing was like Last of Us Part 1 remastered or remake. Last of Us Part 1 remake, which looked like a remaster, but it was a remake. And then they also announced The Last of Us Part 2 remaster that has some other stuff we'll talk about in just a few minutes. But all told, it seemed like they were kind of very hard at work on this and they weren't doing a whole lot of other stuff that they could show. So we just assumed that they were making good progress and the game was coming along swimmingly. But you know what they say about assuming stuff. But it seemed that not all was shiny and beautiful in paradise. Bungie sent over a team of people to go and look at The Last of Us Online sometime earlier this year, late last year. And what they saw when they looked at The Last of Us Online was a game that was perhaps high quality and would be fun for people, but that would not tie people in for long periods of time. They didn't think that this was going to work effectively as a live service game. It was a game that people would probably love for like 30, 40, 50 hours, but not one that they'd be pouring hundreds or thousands of hours into, which is the only way live service games really make sense. And so they sent them back to the drawing board. And what's really funny about that, of course, now is that Bungie is having its own fair share of issues. So they caused The Last of Us Online to basically get shelved after a little bit because they had such negative feedback. Meanwhile, they've been missing their revenue targets on Destiny 2 by as much as 45%, and they're potentially looking at a hostile takeover by Sony, who acquired them, but they still retained their own independence. But it looks like because they've continued to miss financial targets, they could completely forfeit control of their own company, which is a little bit of an oopsie. But anyway, Naughty Dog went back to the drawing board. They kept working away and they took a lot of people off of the project, but they had some small teams still working on it, allegedly. And then Jason Schreier posted this article just describing how they had halted work on the online version of the popular game. And after they reached out for comment to PlayStation and Naughty Dog and they didn't hear anything back, they posted the story. And just a few short minutes after that, there was this post that went up from Naughty Dog themselves, describing basically that they have decided to stop working on it. They're just not doing it. They say, no easy way to say this, we've made the incredibly difficult decision to stop development on the game. But their reasons for doing this were really, really telling, and it's something that gamers have been aware of for a long time. I'm sure the devs were very aware of this, but the executives refused to believe it. What they said was, to release and support The Last of Us Online, we'd have to put all of our studio resources behind supporting post-launch content for years to come, severely impacting development on future single-player games. So we had two paths in front of us: become a solely live service game studio or continue to focus on single-player narrative games that have defined Naughty Dog's heritage. And shocker, they decided to stick with what they are known for, with what they are really, really good at, and that means stepping away from the live service game that they've presumably spent 4 or 5 years working on, since this was originally supposed to be a factions mode for The Last of Us Part 2, which launched a few years ago at this point. So they were working on it even before that, and it's just slowly molded and become bigger and bigger and bigger until the point where they just walked away from it, which is crazy because this means that they've probably spent at least tens upon tens of millions of dollars working on this, if not well over $100 million working on this project, only to abandon it. And it's not the only live service game that Sony has been working on that has seen significant delays or trouble during development. They've previously announced that they're working on 12 different live service games that are actively in production. Some of those were big ones like The Last of Us Online. Others were more niche that didn't get great responses and reactions when they were announced, such as Fair Games with a $sign. If you don't remember this one, this was announced at, I believe, a State of Play, and this was like their big reveal for a big upcoming live service game where you're like, I guess, supposed to be Robin Hood-like characters stealing from billionaires, but then also attacking other people that are trying to steal from the billionaires. It's really, really weird, and it's all the more ironic that it's coming from a multi-billion-dollar company, and it just looks horrible. So who knows if this game ever sees the light of day. I am wholly uninterested in it because it looks painfully generic and also quite cringe, but that's just me. And I mean, the comments tell you everything you need to know about the players' reaction and response to this. Thanks to all our players, but we're unfortunately ending support 1 year later vibes to it, which is quite accurate. You can take the devs out of Ubisoft, but you can't take the Ubisoft out of the devs. I'm 100% sure that this game will have Forspoken levels of dialogue. When will marketing teams learn that it's better to not waste development budget on a CGI trailer that means nothing when you can wait and show us what the game actually plays like? Or I'm going to be rooting for the rich people. So who knows if we actually end up seeing that game. I'm not holding my breath for it personally, but maybe we will. However, it's not the only other game to struggle or be running into development problems. Sony actually announced back in November that they were delaying about half of those 12 games that they were working on in the live service space, one of them being The Last of Us Online, which was delayed and then canceled after they realized it was going to take a lot of money and a lot of time to make it actually work. And without going into specifics and not showing any details, some of the stuff that came out as a result of recent leaks and data breaches on Sony's side of things basically just revealed that Sony is rethinking this live service approach that Jim Ryan headed up. And in case you don't know Jim Ryan, he will soon be the former head of PlayStation, who has headed up this generation basically on the PlayStation side of things. And while the PlayStation 5 has been very successful in terms of selling units, everything else about PlayStation's approach to this generation has been markedly different than previous years and previous generations, or what I think was the best generation for PlayStation, which was the PlayStation 4 gen, headed up by Sean Layden. Instead of having like really good original single player content to drive awards and recognition and console sales with those exclusives, Jim Ryan has taken the approach to just remake everything, remaster everything while charging very high prices for it, try to double down on PC releases to double dip into sales, and then also greenlight a butt ton of live service games to try and print money. And many of those things have not worked out too great, and it's starting to burn through a lot of goodwill with the fan base, and we're seeing a lot of that kind of build up to this pinnacle of The Last of Us Online, a huge project just being walked away from. And I can't help but wonder if this had something to do with the new leadership that's coming in and trying to take over, with Jim Ryan leaving at the end of this year because he says he's retiring. He says he was tired of traveling and flying everywhere, which I'm sure would be very exhausting. But I also have to wonder if maybe leadership and top level brass at PlayStation maybe wasn't super thrilled with how much time and money was being wasted by their first party studios. Maybe he was kind of welcomed to retire. I don't know, purely speculative, but it's weird that right as he's leaving at the end of this year, we get all these announcements and updates about major pivots in approach and then canceled projects, them just walking away from $100 million investment projects. It's really strange, and I don't think it's a coincidence personally. But you know what? Hopefully this just all means that we are headed into a new era of PlayStation Online live service, kind of additional mode options for games. And in just the last few weeks, we've seen some things that were very, very surprising, such as a free update to God of War Ragnarok with the Valhalla expansion, which is like a roguelike mode that adds tons of gameplay time and brings players into the fold to come back to the game, adding narrative content and also just tons of cool combat encounters and gameplay things to keep you engaged. It's an awesome update and it's free, which is crazy. And then early next year, we're getting The Last of Us Part 2 remastered, which is going to have a $10 upgrade path tied to it as well, which is really cool to see. But they're also bringing things such as a roguelike mode, again, very similar to God of War Valhalla, or God of War Ragnarok Valhalla as an expansion, but this time it's coming day one. So if you already own the game and you want to spend $10 to just upgrade to the new version, you can do that. And then you also get this mode, which is really cool. And maybe, just maybe, this is PlayStation's newest approach, and this is what they're going to be doing, is that they'll launch the games, they'll be received well, and then maybe they have some updates or they have a roguelike mode that players like and are engaging with, and they only charge maybe $10 for that. And they get some players to buy it that way. And that just gets a little bit of extra cash in the coffers. That, I think, is much more viable than spending years and years and years and hundreds of millions of dollars to have a game that probably flops, because most live service games flop. And I think you're going to end up with a much happier fan base as well. You know, it's funny. It's like when you respect your customers and charge like a fair price for a quality product, the customer will reward you by purchasing it and engaging with it and promoting it and sharing it through word of mouth, and then you'll be successful. I mean, it's like a real novel idea, but we've seen it with Baldur's Gate 3, a game which won Game of the Year and could charge whatever they want for that game and probably get it. And instead they're locking in at the $60 price point on PC. I believe it's $70 on modern day consoles, because PlayStation and Xbox will take their hefty cut out of those console versions. But they're just offering a massive game without tons of DLC or add-ons or skins or anything, and they just present it to you for the full price. You buy it, you got the full game, and you're happy. You can continue along your merry way. And I just hope that the pendulum is swinging back the other way. You know, every few years this happens, where in 2017 it was swinging really far in heavy monetization with like loot boxes and all the crazy stuff they were doing in Battlefront 2 and Shadow of War and all of those games. And then it swings back and we get some really good single player games like Ghost of Tsushima, The Last of Us Part 2, all of those in like 2020, Mafia Definitive Edition. And then it swings back and we do the Battle Pass live service thing all the way over here. And now it's hopefully swinging back towards the center. I'm sure in a couple of years, we're going to have another flood of crazy monetization or a new scheme of just like straight up gambling with your blood or something like that. But in the meantime, hopefully we just get more stuff like God of War Ragnarok Valhalla, like The Last of Us with the roguelike mode and only a $10 upgrade path, which I think is more than fair. That's what I'm hoping for. That's what I want to see. And maybe when we get The Last of Us Part 3, which I'm sure is coming, we'll see some of, or at least some form of The Last of Us Online. Maybe a factions mode comes day one because they already basically built it. That would be super awesome. But hopefully some of these executives will start to realize it's not as simple as just taking your world-class single-player studio and then asking them to make a world-class multiplayer game that prints money. It's just frankly not the same thing. Naughty Dog's amazing at what they do, but to ask them to try and make Fortnite 2 is just not gonna work. It's a very different kind of game and very different kind of project. Just because they won Game of the Year over here does not mean that they'll make a Game of the Year level live service game. It just doesn't work that way. And unfortunately, a lot of these executives are too pig-headed to realize that until they've wasted hundreds of millions of dollars and then laid off a bunch of people because it's like their fault that the executives wasted all that money. And so they have to be fired to make up the difference, which is just, you gotta love it. But in the next few months or years, we're probably gonna see sneak peeks at what The Last of Us Online actually did look like. And no, I don't think it's gonna be stuff like this. This was an alleged leaked main menu screen. J-Rock posted it, but it originated on Reset Era. And I'm just gonna be real, this is like one of the fakest things I've ever seen. For one, look at these hands. Like AI art really struggles with human hands for whatever reason, and this looks really, really weird to me. These fingertips, I don't know what the hell those are. I've played a lot of Naughty Dog games. I've never seen fingertips that go to like pointed condoms, so I don't know what the hell that is supposed to be. Also, if you go over here, what the hell is this window? Like if you look at this window, just try to get a look at the perspective. Is the window facing this way? Is it angled that way? Is the wall flat? And then this is breaking off this. It doesn't make any sense. This perspective is all sorts of warped. This lamp over here looks really, really strange as well. And then are these supposed to be mirrors or something? They're supposed to be at the same level, but they're like one's bigger and one's smaller. Just every part of it looks AI generated to me. And then they went in and added some photoshopped like with the regular Last of Us font. They put in some little UI elements, which honestly they did pretty good in terms of the UI. I think the UI looks pretty good, but no part of this looks genuine to me. If they come out and say that this was genuine, I'm gonna be like, well, yeah, I mean, this is why you canceled it. It makes sense. You should have canceled it, honestly. But I actually wanted to see whether or not this was AI generated. So I went into Midjourney and I wanted to see if I could generate something even better. And this is what I came up with just a very basic prompt of like a main menu screen for a Naughty Dog Last of Us game, gameplay still, blah, blah, blah. And this is what it spat out in about 15 seconds of trying. So I'm sure if I messed with it even more, I could get to the point where I have something even more presentable. But frankly, I like this more than that fake ass main menu that we saw before. So I'll go with this one. But you see what I mean? AI really struggles with fingers. Like it really struggles, especially if it's interacting with something in the distance. It just doesn't really know how to handle it. It just really starts to fall apart. And that's why if you're ever trying to figure out if something's AI generated, look at like fingers, toes, teeth, or like those fine details that we can tell the difference on like really, really quickly. But AI for some reason just doesn't understand it. But yeah, watch as somebody comes out and is like, yep, I can confirm this is the main menu screen. I'm gonna laugh my ass off because seriously, if this was the main menu, yeah, it's probably good that they canceled it. But I don't think it was, man. I think it looks really, really, really funky. Really bad. I don't buy for a second that that's real. Oh, baby. You know what? Let me know what you think of The Last of Us Online. Are you sad to see it canceled? Or do you just frankly not care? I'm interested if you were ever going to give it a shot. I think I would have. I don't think it was a game that I was going to play for like 2,000 hours or anything, but I was probably going to have a good time. So let me know what you think below. Ooh, also, I know I'm supposed to ask you to like subscribe or something, but I checked my video stats and I saw that 69% of you guys are not subscribed who watch these videos. And I think that's a really good number for us to stick at. So nobody subscribe, okay? Just keep it level. Nobody subscribe. That's an order. Oh goodness, I'm a 12-year-old at heart, I swear. Okay. What were we doing? I forgot. Oh yeah, signing off. Thank you for watching, everybody. I love you all dearly. I will see you on the other side of Christmas. Have a Merry Christmas or Happy Holiday, whatever you celebrate. Just give someone that you love a nice big hug and then whisper in their ear and tell them, Luke told me to do this. They'll understand. Much love. I'll see you in the next one. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye.